Gus Newport was born and raised in Rochester and was literally spoon-fed activism by his mother and his grandmother. When a riot broke out in Rochester in 1964, Gus left the security of his corporate job to help resolve the situation, and in the process, got the city to establish scholarships for students who otherwise would not have attended college. Consulting for the Department of Labor, he took on economic development, creating holistic solutions that lift up communities. This was a national program, and its impact was felt in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the Bay Area. After Gus landed in Berkeley and became mayor, he got involved in the peace movement. Because of him, there was no way to separate it from the civil rights struggle. As mayor from 1979 to 1986, Gus' leadership was the first, at Berkeley under his leadership, was the first city to divest from apartheid South Africa. We worked together, me no longer a city employee, but as an actor, with others and many citizens in California and the United States and the world, around the world, to divest from South Africa. This is what that legacy is. Today, we see major efforts to divest in the private prison industry, from companies involved in the Dakota Access Pipeline, from the profiting of a wall, and for those who support Palestinian rights. But the blueprint for that was the apartheid divestment movement. This was also a time of the Salvadorian Civil War, and also the Civil War in Nicaragua as well. You heard of Rece started with the sanctuary movement. Well, Gus worked with these communities, ordered the local police not to arrest immigrants. This is doing when he was mayor. Worked to assist the refugees coming into and offering homes and education and health care and legal aid. After moving to Boston, Gus was exposed to the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative and became its executive director. Working together, they were able to do something remarkable, undone in any other situation. A nonprofit, community-based planning, organizing entity for the first time ever gained the power of eminent domain and created a community land trust. They took a neighborhood ravaged by disinvestment, arson, and dumping, and restored it to vibrancy. After the man-made catastrophe of Katrina, Gus stepped up and served on the advisory board to oversee rebuilding plans for New Orleans. The work he did with the Dudley Street Initiative was used as a model for the Crescent City Community Land Trust. He also helped the Gulfport and Mississippi community rebuild. These are the communities that were historically neglected by their governments and then fell victim to an unavoidable tragedy. Although young at heart, Gus has been on the leadership committee of the National Council of Elders, a group of social justice warriors who are all over 65. I don't know how come I'm not on that committee. And he still is going strong. Social justice is a noble and worthwhile goal, but it is never easy, and it may not be fully attainable, but we must continue to work forward. And Gibran has something to say on this. Death and prison we mete out to small offenders of the law, while honor, wealth, and full respect on greater pirates we bestow. Who kills the body, he must die. Who kills the spirit, he goes free. Our fight must be against the forces that kill the spirit. And Gus Newport, my brother, has been a warrior in that cause his entire life. Let me introduce you to my friend who receives the Gibran Spirit of Humanity Award for individual achievement, to the Honorable Gus Eugene Newport.
You know, when I became vice president from the U.S. to the World Peace Council, I was introduced in Finland to the legislature one time. And as the Speaker of the legislature, which is made up of people from Finland and Sweden, went on to say, he always wanted to hold short any introductions because often the introduction overburdened what the person had done. Of course, an hour and a half later, I was introduced. It's with humbleness that I accept this award from the American Arab Institute, you know, of the Khalil Gibran Humanity Award. It was first brought to my attention the 1st or 2nd of December. We were all in Burlington, Vermont at the Sanders Institute. And Danny, Cornell West, myself, Nina Turner, and some people were on a panel. And when I came off that panel, you know Jim Zogby. Jim Zogby's pretty slick. He eases up to me and said, look, brother, I want you to know that you've been selected for the award. And I wasn't fully aware of what that meant. And by the way, we had some of the greatest discussions, 250 people, at the Sanders Institute. And Jane Sanders, Bernie Sanders' wife, is here. And it was her institute. But a couple of weeks later, I received a letter from the institute spelling out the details of this award. And they had done such a great summary of some of my work, but then when I saw the previous awardees, Muhammad Ali, Queen Noor, I said, oh, they made a great mistake. But you know, I was fortunate enough, my grandmother started taking me at the age of 5 to see Paul Robeson and Marian Anderson. My grandmother was raised in the South in Virginia. In the 4th grade, after picking cotton one day, she went to school late. She walked in, a white teacher slapped her. She walked out of school and never went back. But she became an avid reader. And when she got married very young, on the night of their wedding, the Ku Klux Klan and the local police in this small town arrested them, took their presents, and put them in jail for a couple of days. She eventually picked up the family, my mother and her mother, and moved to Pittsburgh, where they had cousins, and then to Rochester, New York, where I was born, where she had a sister. But understand what old black people went through in the Jim Crow days, etc., whatever else, and think about what people in the Arab communities went through. Black people to this day will not tell some of the stories that they went under. My grandmother, she started taking me to the Philharmonic, as I said, to see all this stuff, but it was not until I was 26, head of the biggest civil rights group in Rochester, when Malcolm X came to visit me. And I'll tell you a little bit about that also. I was with Malcolm X 4 days before he was assassinated. I helped create the Organization for Afro-American Unity. But my grandmother somewhat felt that I was ready for the duties necessary, and that's when she advised me that her mother was a slave, blinded by the plantation boss. And it's that kind of thing that we go through, understanding the cultural needs and why we have to be sensitive to the needs of all people of color, especially based on the way this country was founded and by the way it's treating people of color to this day. And as Danny said, we put the initiative on the ballot to disinvest from South Africa when I was running for mayor and became the first city in the country to do so. Immediately following that, some of the students at the University of California, Jews and Arabs, came to me and said, we want to put an initiative on the ballot that if it passes, that I, as the mayor of Berkeley, would write a letter to the President and the Secretary of State telling the U.S. to withhold all funds going to development of the settlements. Noam Chomsky came and campaigned with me, Howard Zinn, but the Zionists poured so much money in that initiative was defeated. But it started other cities to do it. Cambridge did it. Others went on. And so what they began telling me, the county wanted to withhold our money because they said, you ain't got no business speaking to the federal government, the military budget, et cetera, anything like that. I said, yes, I have. If we're going to get the things that we need to deal with homelessness, affordable housing, job development, and everything else, we need to cut the military budget. We got over 1,000 bases around the country thinking that we're God. And of course, when I first got elected, I was invited to the Non-Aligned Conference in Havana, Cuba. Fidel Castro met my plane when it landed because I was the first North American elected official to go. During that discussion in the Non-Aligned Conference, they said that they passed a resolution that Zionism is racist. And when I got back to Berkeley, I was invited on a radio station. And they said, we just want to talk about what you all did there. And when it went live, that was the first question. And I said, the Asian and African brothers and sisters at this conference said that Zionism is racist. If that's the case, I oppose it. They cut the program. I was called out by the so-called progressive community, Jewish community of Berkeley, saying, we love you, Brother Gus, we all work for you, but we wish you'd have nothing to say about Israel. And I reminded them and said, no, I'm not Andy Young, because when Andy Young was at the United Nations, when he met Yasser Arafat, they put him on the spot and he stepped back. I said, I didn't aspire to be the mayor, y'all drafted me. And before you tell me what I can and can't speak to, I'll resign as mayor. I don't need this position. No, Gus, we love you. We just want you to know what's the right thing to do. Meanwhile, they started arguing about, because Israel was working with South Africa under the apartheid rules in one of the few countries in the world, and the Jews started arguing with each other. I said, oh, look at here. Immediately following that, there was a civil war going on in El Salvador. And the FMLN and the Jesuit priests invited me to go to El Salvador clandestinely to observe that war, and they took me up into Chalatenango, and we got bombed on a march by American-marked planes. I got back out of there, and I went to spoke at 20 cities and before the Congress, and John Conyers, who you now replaced, darling, good man, took me to the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, and I spoke before them. And Elliot Abrams and all these guys were standing behind me hollering, et cetera, and whatever else. And I knew that all those things that I'd begun to participate in well. When Shabra and Shatila was bombed, Danny Glover and I were speaking at public demonstrations. And we had to straighten out even some of our own people because they're talking about, no, you got to stop speaking for immigrants and this because they're taking our jobs. You see, the problem with the United States of America, history is not totally recorded. It's propaganda. We're 47th in the world in literacy and education right now because we're not doing that which teach Jane. Jane Saunders will tell you, I first met Jane and Bernie 40 years ago. She was running child care centers, education, whatever else and this and that. Bernie turned Burlington, Vermont totally around. Bernie invited me when he ran for governor in Vermont to come out and campaign with him. And I come out and a couple of writers from the UPI and AP pulled out a long sheet of paper, those old printouts with the big hole printers. And Bernie said, what the hell is that? She said, Bernie, we can put a public figure's name in a computer and we put Gus Newport's and we got 90 stories. And Bernie, we want to know why you, a Jew from Brooklyn and a socialist, invites Gus Newport, a black nationalist and a socialist, to campaign in a state that's 97% white. Bernie says, because we're going to talk about the issues. They had no more questions. So it's that kind of understanding and pursuit and recognizing what the Arab Americans, or what the Arab community in general goes through. I mean, look what Trump is doing now, stopping people from coming to this country now. I mean, let's face it, he just stopped a brother from Palestine coming over here to speak that had been invited by you all, et cetera, whatever else. But the fact is, the media doesn't share with us that kind of stuff, not to the detail we know. And Americans, for the most part, don't even understand the functions of our federal government that is damaging to our national government. I am sickened when I go across this country and see the homeless people sleeping under bridges, et cetera, and nobody is speaking about the public policy, those needs, et cetera, or whatever else. I'm 84 years old. My granddaughter says, Papa, you're 4 years older than baseball. But as long as I've got the heart, and as long as the need is there, I'm going to keep on. And I must say, I'm so pleased that I am working. I spoke at gave a couple of talks in Seattle just before I come here, and I do a lot of work in Seattle now. My posse is here from Seattle, and I'm so pleased that they could come. I got another partner here from Dallas who I first met through the Children's Defense Fund, who won an award from you all a few years ago. We have got to come collectively together to override this situation. And let me tell you, Zagwe knows this, I was on the committee on the question of Palestine, and during that time, I was taken over to Palestine during the Second Intifada. I thought I knew what an apartheid system was, but when we went into Gaza, there was muddy water, all full of dirt and debris running right by the United Nations hospital, with kids playing in this and that. I got locked down in Gaza. Went to a prison in Gaza. You had to crawl on your knees to get in. You couldn't stand up. It wasn't built. We don't know the practices that are inhumane. The worst apartheid situation that I ever seen or observed was in Palestine. And it is to this day. And so I say to you, I was fortunate enough, as Danny Glover was, to come from family that understand that love is a defining factor. In love it must be. And working together collectively, we shall overcome. And so I'm not supposed to get political in here. But I'm also so proud that Sister Nina Turner, who's head of our revolution, is here. And her predecessor, who was head of our revolution, is here also. Now I want you to know, now you people who are in the media, don't write this. But if Bernie Sanders gets elected president, Sister Nina Turner will be Secretary of State. Thank you. Love you all.